Great day in the morning, you guys. It is Friday. Finally. I was up here in Singapore. And yeah, I want to talk about loss today. I was listening to Courage Become Her, and I was quite moved by her story. And I didn't realize if it wasn't for her, I didn't realize, I wouldn't have realized that this month is also Baby Loss Awareness Month. And I didn't know there was such a thing. I mean, I knew that October has always been Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I've always supported that, mostly because I'm a football fan, or at least I was, and I used to love it when in October everybody would come out with all their pink gear. So that was kind of cool. Um, and I just feel like it was a great cause, and because it was so publicized, I got behind it easy, right? Obviously, I've also been touched by cancer, breast cancer. I have an aunt who has been through it and is still kicking. She's still doing all she can to be there for her two daughters, and I feel like there's nothing more beautiful than a determined woman to thrive no matter what they've been through. And my heart goes out to her, and I think she's just amazing. I hope she knows that already. But in the meantime, I wanted to tackle this subject as well because I think it's really, really important. Now, Curves Become Her was very, very sweet and very brave to be able to come out live and speak in her stories about her own experience. And I think it's amazing because she actually had to name, all the players in her particular story, the ones who made it a little more difficult, the ones who do what they know because that's all they know and they don't know how to be more compassionate than they are, because I really think it's a generational thing. And I feel like, based on the conversation I had last night as well, that our parents' generation, they really, really were not allowed to speak up. They weren't allowed to think for themselves. They had to do what they were told because the generation before that was like that as well. So they kind of passed it down because they thought that's just the way things were. So that generation does not question. That generation does not talk about their feelings because it's not okay to talk about their feelings back then. And so they expect the world to continue as it has always been. But we, as their children, as the next generation, we feel that lack. We feel that space where we needed the support, and we did all we could to go get the support we needed. Obviously, some of us have been through counseling, and whether it worked or not, we went to friends. We got rid of friends that weren't supportive. We stopped speaking to people who made us feel badly, and we started focusing on where we can get the love and support that we needed. So I understand that, and man, my heart goes out to her. This is a difficult conversation to have. It's difficult to come out there and just tell people. And then, of course, you get people on both sides of the fence. Some people who really feel for you, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. That's a difficult situation to live through." And then, they see this layer to you, so they understand, hey, okay, now I know why you're such a big advocate, why you go out there and you really speak your mind. You really make sure that people have a space to be safe and feel supported. I get it. And then, of course, you have people on the other side of the fence who are like, oh my God, here she goes talking about this stuff again. And I guess they just want attention. Now, for those people that come out there talking negative, that want to put you down, I don't know what your experience has been. And I don't know if maybe you've tried to get attention and it hasn't worked out for you. But the fact that you would even put someone down or even question whether they're being real or not, that's very sad, especially when this person is telling you like all the details of what's going on. I know there are people out there that they jump on a bandwagon whenever one is around and they want to get attention. I get it. I know those people. That's actually a symptom of something more deep-seated. But for you to question someone who is pouring her heart out and is doing all they can not to be, you know, broken down while they speak, as in like visibly shaken, visibly upset while they're speaking about these things, and trying to be as simple, like the simplest, most plain language that they can possibly tell their story in. I think it's rude, and I think it's sad. It's actually more reflective of who you are rather than what they're going through. So I hope you take this the right way, whether or not you do or not. I just had to say it. So that's the disclaimer I'm going to put out there. But in the meantime, I do want to point out the Curves Become Her. She spoke about her experience, which is about miscarriage. And I know in my family, my mom miscarried before each of us. And while I wasn't there for my middle brother, as far as the miscarriage that happened before him, I was there for the miscarriage that happened before my youngest brother, and it took a toll on us all. We were all very happy. We were all celebrating. I'm pretty sure she made it to almost her 6th month before she miscarried, and it was a major tragedy for all of us. So we really felt that. And I'm glad I felt that. I'm glad I got to live through that a little bit because it gave me a little bit more um, of an open heart about those situations. Because in time I would face my own. So she spoke about miscarriage. I kind of want to speak to you about abortion because there is a space that goes missing as well. So the whole reason hmm, the whole reason I named this empty spaces is because this episode is about grieving in general. While I'm talking about children um, and the anticipation of having a child, making space in your mind to, okay, all the things that would change and all the things you would prepare for, it's a beautiful thing. But when it doesn't happen, you kind of have to deal with all that space you made as well. And it's the same for me, in my opinion, about grieving when you have the loss of an actual person, like someone who has lived with you for very, very many years. Maybe it's a father, a sister, a brother, a mother. I'm not sure. But when you lose people, you deal with that empty space all of a sudden. The space they used to take up in real life and in your heart, and suddenly you're dealing with all of that space. So that's part of the reason I named it empty space. But in the meantime, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about my experience with abortion because it's something I still deal with, and it's not quite the same as miscarriage, and I still feel it. So it is still a hole that I feel in my life. It's still these pieces that are missing because unfortunately for me, I did go through multiple. I At 38, I would have had 5 children, and considering that my only goal in life was to have kids, was to be a mom, um, I feel that very deeply. And unfortunately, in abortion, you do have the ability to say no and to stop it, but it also depends on the situation you're living in. I felt really badly. So the first one unfortunately happened when I was about 22, and I was still in college. I hadn't finished college yet. It was my college sweetheart. We were, going steady, and unfortunately, his reaction was terrible. His reaction was like, "Well, shit. I guess I better quit everything and prepare to be a father." And he did not seem happy about it. And I understand. I understand the pressure that he was facing as well because he hadn't graduated yet. I hadn't graduated yet. How was he supposed to provide for a baby? I get that. And I understand that was his initial reaction, but it wasn't like we had space to talk about it after. And this is part of the thing that I've been trying to like push out there. We need to talk about these things. We need to be able to, you know, to discuss all the emotions that we're feeling. I'm not saying that his reaction was wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. In my opinion, his reaction was very real. It was unfiltered. And I appreciate that from him. But it doesn't mean that it didn't affect my reaction as well. Where I was excited and I was nervous to tell him, his reaction kind of blew me out of the water. Now, he had a lot of support from his family about his decision. He did not want to become a father. But me, on the other hand, I felt like the decision to be in a healthy, supportive family with my child was kind of taken from me. I didn't have that option anymore. Um, the one thing I wanted, the only stipulation to being a mom in my entire life, was to be in a healthy, loving relationship. So I thought I'd done everything right. I mean, I went to high school, I went to college, I found somebody I really loved, and I thought we were very, very in love. Um, and we'd been together for several years already. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I felt like there was potential for us to get married, and we were talking about marriage at the time, and we just so happened to get pregnant before we let out for summer break, and this was going into my junior year of college. Um, and I felt like, wow, okay, you know, maybe I can deal with this. Maybe this is something we can work through. But it wasn't. It was one of those difficult situations, and yes, my parents were very supportive. My mom drove me, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I hate putting that on anybody, right? I don't want anyone to have to go through that because of me. But yep, I put my mom through that. She had to watch me go through this procedure that is both a rude shock to your system and just a tragedy all around. I can't say anything about that. It's a difficult situation. A lot of times you know what you want, but until you have to get into that room and have it sucked out of you, um, it's a difficult feeling. And I really, really wish that the men in our lives were expected to stand there and watch as well, because I think it would change their idea of how easily a problem goes away, because a lot of these times, people see this as a problem. And yeah, it's just really, really difficult. The situation itself is very difficult. So um, I was of two minds about it, this first situation, this first pregnancy. And while on the one hand I was overjoyed, I was so excited, because in my mind a baby meant unconditional love. Somebody would love me for me no matter what. They'd be by my side, they would be with me, I would get to spoil them, I would get to do all the things that I wish somebody had done for me. I could do all those things, and I thought it would be a great, great experience. But on the other hand, I was feeling guilty. I felt like I was taking Dre's future away from him. I felt like I was letting my parents down because I was still unmarried. It's not the right way to do things. Um, I just felt very guilty. I felt guilty for suddenly trying to be selfish and get rid of my child, get rid of a part of me to please somebody else. And that's something that I had to deal with a lot in my life. I've been a people pleaser for a very long time. And it's mostly because I just wanted people to be around me. I wanted people to accept me. I wanted people to like me, because for so long I didn't have it. A lot of who we are is based on the things we didn't have and the things we're trying to fix going forward. So it was difficult. It was horrendous. I felt terrible about the fact that I had two minds about this situation that was supposed to be a really, really great thing. Like, when is life not a great thing to celebrate? And unfortunately, I tried to fix it myself. I took a bunch of pills, and I thought that no one would notice. And I didn't tell anybody. I don't think I've ever admitted this out loud before, actually. I took a bunch of pills, and I felt horrid afterwards. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, what have I done? And what if this child comes out with some kind of, you know, inability, like some difficulty that they would have to struggle with their whole life, because I was dumb enough to take issues into my own hands in a moment of weakness. And suddenly I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Um, from what I remember, I'd passed out and slept through it. And I woke up and I was okay. I was a little bit sick the next day, but I wasn't sure if it was morning sickness or not. But at that point, I was like, holy crap, what have I done? And I felt terrible. At that point, it was almost like subconsciously I'd made the decision for him. I did not want to drag somebody into my life unwillingly. I did not want to have someone who was going to kick and scream the whole way because they were just not ready to be a parent. And I guess subconsciously I tried to take care of it. So at that point, when he was like, look, I'll pay for it, let's just go get this done, I was like, okay. And I went through the motions. um, that whole day sucked because I was in a lot of pain. And what they don't tell you is, when you leave, um, you will bleed. You're expected to bleed out. Your body's clearing whatever was left, from the pregnancy. But they won't tell you how you will bleed. It's not a regular period. You will clot. You will pass pieces. They won't tell you how big they are because it varies from person to person. And that scared the living crap out of me, literally. But also what happened was, while my mother was trying to be there, she's not an emotional person. I mean, yeah, she cries during movies and stuff, but she's not one of those people who speaks about her feelings at all. And the only way she knew how to help me move forward was to push me to move forward. As in, go get a job. You can't sit at home. You need to make sure you go to work every day. You need to make sure you do this and every day. And what ended up happening was I held two jobs that summer, the rest of the summer. And I worked at a movie store and I worked at Subway. Um, but it felt harsh to me. It felt cold, and it felt harsh to me because suddenly, from going, to this person who is being pampered and taken extra care of because I was pregnant, to suddenly being this person who was no longer pregnant, and it was almost like punishment. She forced me to go get a job. And I didn't understand it at the time. I knew she was coping the best way she knew how. Now I do understand that, but at the time it felt like, oh my God, she hates me. And I would walk. I would walk a mile to work every day in the summer and walk a mile back. And while it was good for me to have something to do to take my mind off of it, it was also very, very empty feeling. It was like I went from this one extreme of being excited to have a baby and thinking of all the things, thinking of all the possibilities my life would have, to suddenly feeling very guilty and ashamed, suddenly feeling very alone because no one else was going through this with me because I was pushed out of the house to go get a job. So they wouldn't be able to see, the amount of times I wanted to cry. They wouldn't be able to see the things that I saw, the things that I felt, the things that I experienced. Man, diaper commercials suck. Um, fam- Commercials with happy families, movies with happy families sucked for a long time. Kids that used to come in the store to pick out movies, it was really difficult. And just in general, it was like, everywhere I went now, I saw babies. I noticed it more because I noticed the lack. I missed my child. I missed having a soul with me. So that was the very first time. It was very, very difficult, and I went years without really feeling connected to anyone ever again. Sex was kind of meaningless. Um, Being in that relationship, because it went on for another 5 years, and it took him total 7 years from the very first time we met each other and started dating till the day he decided I was good enough to ask to marry. And at that point, it was a screaming no, but I said yes because it was in a public place, and I felt really badly about shutting him down like that. And I just felt uncomfortable, and I didn't know how to say anything because I was already in this relationship, and I felt like I put in work, and I felt like you know, I'd been there for him, and I didn't want to leave him behind, but it no longer fit. Fast forward to through the breakup, which was messy, and moving on and moving out of the house that we shared into my own apartment. A couple other difficulties that I encountered myself, and I had met a guy at work who was already a father, and I felt like, wow, this was a blessing in my life because for the child that I had lost, I gained two. I was happy to be mother figure to two children from two different moms who did not identify with each other as siblings. They felt like they were only children, and they had troubles with their own mothers because they were constantly being shipped between two houses. Now, these two women were not married to my now ex-husband, but they thought that it was a great idea to kind of see if they could get pregnant by him so they could keep him around a little bit longer. Um, anyway, so I felt like it was a blessing in disguise. I felt like I had been given this chance to make up for my sin. Yes, I considered it a sin, um, which means the torment inside my mind was only that much louder. Um, I didn't know whether I was pro-choice or pro-life, and at that point, I was punishing myself, and I felt like this was a good way to earn my keep, basically. And I did my best. I raised those two kids as if they were my own. And it was difficult because in the state of Virginia, step parents do not have any rights. And even if I were to adopt them, which I was not allowed to adopt them because their mothers weren't interested in that. And I get that. That's their prerogative. That's fine. But it was difficult. When you talk about baby mama drama, I went through it twice because there were two moms, and it was difficult. Um, but that's another story. So we'll focus on baby loss since it is baby loss month, right? And we'll talk about the grief in a minute. Unfortunately, I had decided a while back, right? Once I went through the first abortion, I decided never again. I'm not going to do this again for nobody. I will be strong. I will make sure I stand up for my child. I will do everything I can. And that's great and everything until you're put in that situation again. Unfortunately, this time it was after having been evicted from my apartment. It was after um, having lost the next apartment because the apartment burned down, and I found that I was living with my now ex-husband, which was my then boyfriend. And I was doing everything. I stepped right into mom role, and I found a way to have both the kids with me in a house with him, and we were trying to just, build this family. I was trying to pull them together because he was struggling with having to run between houses and everything, and I felt that. I saw that. I felt really bad about that. So we got pregnant. We'd only been dating for maybe a year or so. By that point, Aaliyah was already calling me mom. Little Aaron didn't feel that way. I mean, he did, but he didn't feel like he could call me mom because he was closer to his mom than Aaliyah was to hers. So that was fine. And it just so happened that we got pregnant. And I didn't tell the kids, obviously. I told him. I was scared, but I told him, and I was hoping that he'd be happy because he was such a great dad. But he wasn't. He was not happy at all. And I get it. From his point of view, it was another mouth to feed. It was, we weren't in a permanent situation. We were renting a house out in the middle of nowhere. And we were just dating. We weren't married or anything. And he had already decided he didn't want any more children. He was a lot older than me. He's 13 years older than me. And I was excited because I loved him. I was excited because it's a child, and I get to have one of my own. Maybe this is the moment. Maybe I'd have to get to have my own child. But that experience was a roller coaster ride. If nothing else, it was a very, very big roller coaster ride. Um, what ended up happening was he made an appointment. He said, "No, I'm not. I don't want. I want this. You're living with me. You know." He convinced me of all the financial obligations, and I was like, "Okay, fine. Yeah, okay, it makes sense." I went along with it because I'm a people pleaser. And finally, it just so happened that when we got to the date that we were supposed to go together because he has to drive me. I can't drive myself because they do sedate you and put you under, and then you do this, outpatient surgery or whatever. Um, the date came, and I asked him if he was coming home, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I forgot. I can't. I have to whatever." So we missed the appointment. I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, okay, God smiled on me, and maybe he's saying, yeah, you should keep the baby." And when he came home, I told him, it felt like another chance. Let's talk about this. And he was not happy. He didn't want to talk about it. He left the house, and I was left by myself to kind of figure out what to do next. And then he said, "Nope, go make another appointment." And the next appointment came through, and he was like, "All right, I'm coming. I'm going to come pick you up. We'll go to this appointment." And I found myself trying to fight in the car, not argue with him, but fight for the baby, as in like speak up for the baby. And I told him, "Look, I feel like this is a good thing. I feel like I can't go through this again. I told you how I felt about the first one. You know very well like what all I went through. Please don't make me do this." And I pleaded with him. And he drove me out to the middle of downtown Newport News. At the time, when I moved in with him, before that I had been living in Williamsburg, and I knew the area really well. So I knew my way around. But when we moved to Newport News, and I wasn't familiar with the area. I worked in Williamsburg, so Newport News was different. It was a little more rundown. It was a little more scary to me because I didn't know my way around. I'm not good with directions, y'all. I get lost really easy. But he drove me downtown to a bunch of like an old warehouse district. I still remember it. He parked. He was driving my car. He parked in an empty parking lot, and it was a place where this road didn't have much traffic on it. I didn't know where we were. And he parked the car and he jumped out and he started walking. And I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" I was freaking out. I was really worried and scared. And I remember jumping out of the car and running after him and trying to figure out what he was doing. Like, where are you going? What's going on? Like, are you so mad? Like, he said, "No, you want to have this baby, right? So I would suggest that, you take the car back home and pack your stuff because we can't be together if you're not going to do this." And I was freaking out. Like I said, I had lost two houses that, just before I moved in with him. I had kind of made myself a part of his life and his kids' lives. And here I was in the middle of nowhere, freaking out, given this ultimatum that I had to get out or do what he wanted me to do. And I found myself begging him to stay because I was scared. I didn't know what else to do. We were on the way to the appointment and we still had time to get there in time and everything, but I was terrified. And in that moment of weakness, I no longer was standing up for my kid. I was protecting myself. I was being selfish. So here I was again. I went through this situation again. And it was strange because he was there. I mean, he dropped me off and he waited for me to call him back once I was done so he could come pick me up again. And I just remember feeling very empty and hollow. I remember feeling like this terrible person, because to me it was murder again. And I was just beating myself up, and I kept wondering, like, why couldn't he be there with me? Now, unfortunately for me, they weren't able to put me under. They're supposed to, but they weren't able to put me under because they couldn't find a vein. I have really small veins, and they couldn't find a vein. They stuck me like 4 or 5 times, and it just didn't work out. So I was awake. I was awake for the whole thing, and it hurt badly. Um, but I kept my mouth shut. I tried really hard not to cry. And in the recovery room, I couldn't control it. I just cried the whole time. And I kept wishing that he would have been there to be able to see this, to witness this, to understand what he asked of me. And obviously that's not what happened. And I get the reason for that as well, because it can become very dramatic and very traumatic for the people who had made up their mind and understood what they wanted. To see people fighting, to see people struggling with this, to have two people there. So I understood. But it didn't make it any less painful. It didn't make it any less easy. And it was strange because when he picked me up, it was like nothing happened. He was like happy. He was like, "Hey, what's going on? How are you doing? Okay, let's go home." And at that point, we were unmarried, right? And it was this difficult situation. And so I dealt with it on my own. And I don't remember if I told anyone at that time. Like the first one, my mom was there with me, right? But I don't know if I told anyone the second time around. And I felt kind of ashamed and guilty again. And I kept thinking about that child, and what it would have been like, who it would have been, what it could have become, what I might have been if I had just been stronger, if I had just been a better person, a more fearsome person, like a person who had more of a backbone. I was beating myself up pretty good. And with time, life went on and I kind of, put it behind me. And then I got pregnant again. But this time, it just so happened that Aaliyah was with me when I went to get the pregnancy test, and she noticed. I was kind of covering it up with like a bunch of groceries and stuff, but she noticed and she asked me. She goes, "Oh my God, are you?" Because at that point, she had been begging me for a sibling. Even when I got pregnant with the first child and had to give it up with my now ex-husband, she was begging. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I want a little brother. I want a little sister. I want someone." And it was hard because here I was able, and I was pregnant, and I couldn't tell her, and it kicked my ass a little bit for her to be begging for a kid. Anyway, so when we brought the groceries and she noticed the pregnancy test, she asked if I would tell her what happened, because she was so excited. She was so happy, and oh my gosh, it made me feel so great for someone to be so happy for me finally. And it just so happened that I was pregnant, and I told her, "Yeah, I'm pregnant." And the minute he got in the door that night, she ran up to him and said, "Oh my God, mommy's pregnant." And he looked confused, and he wasn't sure if she was talking about her mom or if she was talking about me. And then I felt the tension when he laid his eyes on me, and I was like, "Oh my God, okay, here I go. I'm going to be in trouble." And while he told me he didn't want me to have the baby, he realized that now that Aaliyah knew, he'd have to explain that he didn't want the baby unless he let me have it. So here comes Gayatri. I was very lucky to be able to have her, but the pregnancy was difficult for me. Not in the difficult sense that I was sick all the time. No, I was working 80 hours a week in a in a warehouse that cut wood. I wore steel toe boots and sweatpants to work, and I worked for Lumber Liquidators. I was happy. It was great work. I was making the most money I'd ever made. I felt pretty good about the work. And this was shortly after I'd been laid off from Wyndham because they had downsized. The company was going through some changes. And so it took me a while, but I got this new job and I felt pretty good about it. And then I got pregnant, and it just felt like I was so alone in that house. And that's where the communication started breaking down. We stopped talking to each other that much. We slept in the same bed, but it felt like there was like an ocean between us. He barely touched me. He barely made eye contact. He put up a good show when there were people around, but we didn't speak that much. And I felt so alone. And where I wanted to share the pregnancy with him, luckily for me, I was able to share the pregnancy with my stepkids instead. And they were so cute and so supportive. And it was great. I was lucky that I didn't have morning sickness. I think I maybe threw up twice that entire pregnancy. And yeah, was still working 80 hours a week and commuting an hour each way to work, and still taking care of the kids and still taking care of the house. I remember driving to IKEA, which is about 3 hours away, and buying new furniture because we just moved into a better house, a new house. It's a 2-story house with a backyard finally. The backyard had a major, trampoline in it. I remember making plans for the house and decorating slowly. Like I did that. I felt good about that. I built all the furniture by myself. for the kids. I made sure the rooms had enough space and storage for each of them, where they could actually have people over to sleep over if they wanted to. And I felt really good about that. I felt like I'd accomplished something. Like I was nesting, but in a major way. I was nesting for those two kids as well, as if they were my own kids. So um, I remember it was a weekend. I had just um, finished work, and it was a Saturday. And at that point, I was still bringing work home and stuff and trying to work from home to make sure that everything was going well. And I came home on a weekend. And at that time, I had just finally been converted from a temporary employee to a full-time employee. But because I was already pregnant, pre-existing condition, when I joined as a full-time staff member, I was not eligible for maternity leave. So I came in, and it was June 4th, and it was Aaliyah's birthday. So I was getting ready to go to the movies because Saturday morning we had a ritual. We went to the movies on Saturday mornings because it was half price and it was quiet. We had the whole movie theater to ourselves, so we caught up on all our movies that way. And we went to the grocery store because we always hit up the grocery store to get all our snacks because I have this big purse or whatever. We put our snacks and drinks inside there, and we eat to our heart's content in the movie theater without having to spend so much money because we all know, the prices are inflated at the movie theater. I went to the bathroom because I wanted to blow my nose, and Aaliyah wanted to go to the bathroom. But funnily enough, when I blew my nose, my water broke, and I felt like I'd peed all over myself. So I went to the bathroom and tried to figure out what was going on, and I peed, but then I continued what seemed to be peeing, and it was just, I was losing my mucus plug and all that. And I asked baby girl to run out and get the ambulance because I didn't know what to do next. Like, what do I know? It's my first pregnancy. I remember the ambulance came. The paramedics were like, you're fine. Your contractions aren't that far. Like they're not that close. So you have some time. If you want to go home and get your go bag and get ready to go to the hospital, I would suggest that. And I said, okay, well, I'll just drive myself. They said, no, do not drive yourself because you don't know how bad the contractions will be. Make sure somebody takes you because the last thing you need is to run off the road because the contractions are bad or whatever. So please be safe. Just get somebody to drive you. So of course my first call is to my husband. I said, hey, can you come get me? I just I'm having the baby. It's coming. And he said, yeah, I can't right now. I'm at work. So call Debbie. Debbie is actually my son's mom. Call Debbie. Tell her to take you to the hospital. And I was like, okay. So once again, where he would have been happy, and he was at that point telling people that I'm having a baby, and he was kind of excited or whatever. He would do simple things like feel the baby kick and stuff, but he was still not committed. He was still not around. So I asked my mom, my son's mom, to take me to the hospital, and she did. She was so sweet to take me to the hospital, and Leah came with me, and she stayed with me for a little while, and then she had to go back because she had her own business she was running at the time. Leah stayed with me, and I tried to sleep through some of it because it was a lot of pain, and because the pain kept coming, it was like it came in waves. I felt really nauseous as well, but I didn't throw up. I hate throwing up. I didn't throw up, but it ended up being about 13 hours. In the meantime, Aaron finally came after work. He did not rush. He took his own sweet time. He came after work, and I think in his mind it was like, okay, no big deal. He went home and changed and came back again afterwards, and I remember having to wake him up to cut the cord because I thought it would be nice for him to feel connected to the baby somehow, to cut the cord. I mean, I could have done it myself, but it was all right. And it was just disconnected from there. From there, it was just me and the baby, and then he would just I felt his absence even though he was in the house. I ended up moving downstairs because I was still like I said, I went into labor on the weekend. I went into labor on Aaliyah's birthday, had baby girl on the day after, and then the day after that was actually Aaron's birthday, and I was expected to go back to work, but I worked from home because I'm a new mom. I was discharged on Monday. I went back home and I started working from home. But because baby girl would cry throughout the night and I had to feed her, I got complaints like, oh, she's really loud and I don't get any sleep, and I need to sleep because I'm working. And I'm like, okay, it's not like I'm not working. But anyway, fast forward through that, I was lucky to keep this child. I was so lucky to keep the child. And he was a doting father. He loved being around her, but he wasn't there for the things that really mattered. He wasn't there to feed her. He wasn't there to change her diapers or give her baths and stuff. He was very happy to sleep with her, because it meant that he got to sleep too. But yeah, so that happy home situation where I got to be at home and work from home only lasted about 5 months until they decided, no, I need you here. I need you to be here for meetings and stuff. And I was not ready to put baby girl in daycare. I wasn't, I was so connected to her that I didn't want to leave her anywhere with anyone. I didn't trust anybody. And eventually I made an arrangement with work where I could go in early morning, because at that point she was already sleeping through the night. I would go in early morning. I would pump and keep milk for her to feed, and because she didn't really like formula, and I would go into work at like 1 in the morning and come home by 9 o'clock, and then leave work by 9, be there by 10 because Aaron would go to work at 10. Um, and that worked for a while. I was able to do that for a good long while, but eventually, I had to put her in daycare. It was uncomfortable, but it was what I had to do at the time, and I made sure that she was well taken care of no matter what I did. Eventually, I got pregnant again, and it was one of those random moments where we happened to sleep with each other. It was like a New Year's thing, I think, and I got pregnant, and once again, here we go. He he told me he didn't want it, and he made such a fuss, and at that point, I had something to lose, right? I felt really badly and very worried. At that point, I felt like if I didn't do what he wanted, he could walk away with Gayatri, and that terrified me. So I did what I had to do to protect the child I had. Unfortunately, I didn't stand up for the one I would be having. She would have had a sibling. Um, but once again, I was not in a position where I could, do what I needed to do. At that point, I had been laid off from my job as well because they went through a big, they went through like a lawsuit or something crazy. But they laid me off, and I was still looking for work. So here I was, dependent on him entirely. I was on unemployment with a young child, and terrified to lose her because he used to brag about how he would leave people. He would like move in the middle of the night or move while they were at work or change the locks, and I couldn't afford any of that to happen. I was not dealing with that at all. So that was 2013, and I went through an abortion a couple of days before my birthday. And that was hard because I was still breastfeeding, and that's when my health started to take a turn for the worse. I was still breastfeeding, but I was taking care of baby girl, and I felt depressed and ugly, and just I felt weak and ashamed and so guilty, and I felt terrible. And I tried my best to get through it, and it wasn't all that great. And just the space between us got bigger and bigger, and I filled it more and more with baby girl. At that point, I was no longer living downstairs where I could work at my kitchen table and sleep, or have baby girl sleep on the futon so that he could get sleep. She was sleeping through the night already. At that point, I moved into the guest bedroom. I was sleeping in the guest bedroom because I was not comfortable being in the room with him. And I just felt terrible. And some months went by, and I managed to feed the family on unemployment and make sure that everything was taken care of to the best of my ability. And it just so happened 4th of July, around her birthday, we slept together again, and I got pregnant again. And it wasn't like I planned it. It wasn't like I was, we slept together twice that year, and I got pregnant both times, is basically what it was like. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I have this opportunity again to have this child. And it was like, God's telling me I need to have a baby. I'm supposed to have this baby because otherwise I'm going to get pregnant that easy, right? It's not that easy. Oh, and fast forward, and he is upset with me again, and I'm terrified because the fights were getting worse, and I just did not feel comfortable, and I was pushed into it again. So March was 1, October was number 2, and at that point I had lost so much weight. I looked like I was dying. I looked like I had been starving myself, which I wasn't. I promise I wasn't. But it just so happened my mom was coming home to pick up my grandmother, because in the wintertime my grandmother does not stay in the US. She goes to warmer climates. And I thought, you know what? Baby girl hasn't met my other grandparents, and I was so devastated and so broken up about these children that I had lost that I decided, you know what? I'm leaving him. So I made up my mind. I started packing up and throwing out things that were no longer of any use to me. I packed up the things that were really important to me. I moved everything back to Yogaville and kept it there. And I told him, look, I just need a vacation because I need to get over these 2 losses, these major losses that I'm feeling with. And he was He was so crass as to say, well, will you sleep with me before you go? And I'm thinking, no, I don't want you to touch me. I don't want you anywhere near me. And those are the kinds of the comments that I would get from him. It was like he didn't care whether I lived or died. He didn't care as long as I was around, because I took care of everything. I handled everything for him. But at that point, I left with baby girl, and I never looked back. Dealing with the loss is an ongoing process. You never really quite get over it. You still have flashbacks, you still have memories. Just me talking about it today kind of had me go through those emotions all over again, which is not bad. I'm not broken up over it, but it still hurts because I still feel guilty. I still feel ashamed. And I don't like telling that story because I feel like it shows you a part of me where I wasn't this strong woman that I am today. I was weak. I was worried about my own self-preservation. I was worried about pleasing him still. Obviously, there were other repercussions if I didn't do what he asked, but I felt bullied into it, and I didn't like being bullied. I didn't like feeling like I didn't have power over my own life. Anyway, when I think of grief, I think of the space someone took up in your life, and when they're gone, you notice the space more. It's like having a best friend, and maybe you part ways. Maybe they didn't die, but maybe you part ways and you're no longer friends with them anymore. And suddenly you have all this time that you used to spend speaking to them, all this time that you used to spend, hanging out with them, doing things together, and suddenly that space is empty. You have space but no one to fill it with. And it becomes this void that you notice more and more. I know what it's like to miss my grandparents. I know what it's like to deal with actual loss where people are, they're dead and gone. You can't call them back. You can't reach out to them and make amends. There's nothing you can do anymore. There's no more time left. I was living with my grandparents when each of them passed. And I noticed in a major way because, first of all, I was so connected to them. They were the ones who raised me. I remember when I first went through that first abortion, my grandmother stopped talking to me for a couple of years because she was so ashamed and she was so upset with me. Like, how could you do that? And I felt that loss very much every time I spoke to her. But then when I got to come home and when I left Erin and I brought Gayatri home, she was able to bond with my child, and we got a chance to kind of clear up some of that air that we had that we weren't talking, that we weren't connected to each other. But when she left, when she was gone, it was like everything held memories for me. That house held memories for me. I had to deal with the loss of her presence in each of those rooms, her daily routines, like all of those things really, really were big for me. I noticed them. Now, where I didn't mourn the way I did for my grandparents with each of my children, because I didn't get a chance to start a routine with them. I did feel their loss every time I saw children who were running around playing, siblings that were fighting with each other, when people got pregnant and announced that they were pregnant, commercials. Like I said, in Singapore, it was strange for me because for them to advertise, please get pregnant, please have children, on the side of a bus was a little strange, but it was like double shot for me because here I was without a spouse, without a partner where I could even try to think about having a baby. And then I had to deal with the fact that God gave me the opportunity to have 4 more. And it was like I spat in his face and said no, because I chose myself first. There are a lot of thoughts that run through your head when you have loss. Whether that's something you caused or not, it's still a lot of thoughts in your head. You have to reconcile who you are. What did you stand for? What was it that, you thought was so important that you gave up a pure being, a pure life? Someone else you could bring into the world that might be able to change the world and make a difference. So I deal with that a lot. Baby girl sometimes says, no one plays with me, no one hangs out with me. And she's a single child. Yes, I understand that. And I do my best to hang out with her and play with her and give her opportunities to play with other kids and stuff. But I know what that's like. I had siblings. I had people around when I was growing up, but it's just me and her. And I'm very grateful that my mom lives with us right now and she has someone to talk to, another opinion, another person. But this little girl, who is 8, is more adult than she is child because she's grown up around adults. And while that's amazing and beautiful in its own way, I still wish I could have given her siblings. I still wish I could have other kids running around the house. So I do, whenever I have a chance, I, invite other kids to come hang out with us, and we spend time. We go down to the playground sometimes to just play with the other kids. But it is difficult. This is something that will never go away. So when Curbs Becomes Her talks about miscarriage, I feel terribly for her, because that inner real, that conversation she has with God, with herself, is very different from the conversation I have. I wouldn't blame her if she was upset and didn't understand why, and how can this happen to me? I get it. I hear that. I understand. But my conversation is more like, why wasn't I strong enough? Why was I so weak that I cowered before this man that I gave him all the power over my life? Why was it only when, the fighting got so bad that baby girl stepped in between us that I decided, nope, she can't live like this. I don't want her to see this part of her father. I want her to have good memories of him and let it go. And I walked away. I don't know what kind of loss you're dealing with. I don't know if you've lost a loved one. I don't know if you've been through a miscarriage. I don't know if you've lost a piece of yourself due to cancer. All of that loss is major, because our identity is so wrapped up in the experiences that we've had, the parts of ourselves that we love. All of that stuff is really, really major. And for me, it's about missing that space. When you're grieving, when you're trying to get over a big change in your life. For me, it was a big change. I left the hemisphere to start over. It wasn't like I moved down the street to another city. I left the entire hemisphere. There's no way. Okay, that's not true. It would take a lot of effort to go back and see him. It would take a lot of effort for him to come see me. Okay? But dealing with that loss, when I first came back, grocery shopping was painful, because I was so used to buying what he loved to eat and cooking what he loved to eat, and making sure that he was still taken care of, even though we didn't talk, even though we weren't affectionate with each other, even though I was married to him, but we weren't connected. Everything I did was for him and for his kids. Everything I did, like everything I saw, I treated him like my best friend, because I didn't have any other friends. He was he was smart enough to have me isolated from everybody I knew. So new people threatened him, and he would make me feel like I was not treating him with respect, and that he was afraid that I was going to leave him or cheat. And so I made sure that he was my first priority, and then came the kids, and it was just, that was it. I was consumed with his family, the family I was building for him. And so when I left, I had to deal with that loss, that space where I would come home and check Aaliyah's homework, and I would come home and check on Aaron's homework, and I would do the laundry for them, and I would clean the house, like all those little things I no longer had. I had to start a new routine in a completely different country where the time was upside down for what I was used to. Like, there's so many things I had to change. But I also knew that I was depressed, and I took some time to kind of come out of my room for a while. And that's a part of my life that I hope little G never ever remembers, but it happened. I remember it. I know what it was like. And I hope I didn't hurt her too much by not really being present for a while. But eventually I came out of it, and I found like a different kind of healing by being around her, by letting her show me the miracles and wonders of the world, because I'd completely forgotten. Everything had kind of turned dull gray. There was no color anymore for me until I started spending more attention on her, playing with her, being around her, taking her around Singapore just to see the sights. And that's basically all I can say about the void that you feel, that space that you suddenly feel when you lost someone. Eventually you find things to fill it with, so you don't feel it so much. And it's not that you're forgetting them, it's not that you're putting them behind you on purpose, it's also that you gotta find a way to cope. Because I couldn't be sad all the time. I couldn't do it anymore. I was all cried out. My eyes would burn when I woke up in the morning, because I'd cried so much in my sleep and to put myself to sleep. Nothing prepares you for loss. Any kind of loss. Loss of a pet, loss of a loved one, loss of a child. Nothing prepares you for that. But I do know that for me, in my small way of thinking, I look at it as space. Space that was filled by something that suddenly is empty, and because it's empty, you notice it more. It's a difference in your world. It's a change. You notice the changes more than you notice the things that are constant. It's why we take people for granted when they're always there. It's not until they're not there that we suddenly notice, hey, oh my God, she did all these things for me and she's no longer there for me anymore. So please, cherish the people you have around you. Be kind to everyone you see. You have no idea what they've lived through. Like looking at Curves Becomes Her and the advocacy that she does, the support she throws behind the LGBTQ movement, plus size modeling, love your body, all of that stuff. I knew that she'd probably been through something for her to be so devout to this cause, to all these causes, but I had no idea what it was. And I couldn't begin to imagine what she felt. And for her to lose two in the span of almost 6 months, I can't imagine. And I know what Indian culture is like. I know exactly what she's talking about when she says, first thing that happens once you graduate, secondary school is, okay, when you get married, you're not allowed to date, but, when you get married. And then once you get married, it's like, all right, well, when are you having kids? And once you have one, it's like, okay, well, when's the next one coming out? It's always a constant question of when's the next one, when's the next one. The expectation is to have a big family, and I get that. It's what our parents grew up with. It's what they know. They do what they know. They can't. They're not capable of expanding their minds. They're not used to it. They've never been given that chance before to entertain thoughts that aren't in line with what they've always known. And I get that. But my heart goes out to her. Phenomenal young lady. Powerhouse of a woman if she doesn't realize it herself. And I have mad respect for her. I have a lot of respect for anyone that's dealing with grief. I need you to know that you're not by yourself. I need you to know that the way you cope is the way you cope. And hopefully it's something that is productive and not destructive. I don't want to see anyone spiral out of control. I don't want to see anyone numb themselves with drugs and alcohol. Because then you tend to lose yourself as well. Not just the void that you're already feeling, but you tend to lose yourself as well. And that is a difficult thing to come back and rebuild. I know, because I lost myself in a relationship. 2 of them to be exact. 16 years of my life. And I lost myself to 2 different people. And in the end, I couldn't remember what I was like at all. Who I was in the beginning at all. So the process of leaving him and coming back home was also a process of recreating myself once again and rediscovering myself through the eyes of my daughter. So here I am, ready to support anyone who needs it, because I know what it's like without the support. I know what it's like to be alone with your thoughts. Depression is no small thing. And I realized I couldn't continue living in the past. I had to honor my kids, the living and the ones that have passed on. And I had to live in such a way that would make them proud, that made all their sacrifices worthwhile. So, with that being said, you know my name. My name is Rasati. You know where to find me. If you're dealing with anything remotely close to this stuff, you just need someone to listen to you, please, by all means, come talk to me. Hit me up. Send me messages, send me questions. If you don't want to, become a client, that's fine. If you don't want to pay for a course, that's fine. You want me to answer some questions? Send me a message and then be prepared to listen to it live, because I'm going to go ahead and talk to people and see what they have to say. Okay? I love you guys. Mostly because I finally learned to love myself. So now I have space for all of you as well. I was broken and expanded, and now I have space for all of you. So, when you're ready, you know where I am. But in the meantime, don't be so hard on yourself. Take each day as it comes, one section of time at a time. Really, really, really want to see you thrive, not just exist. Okay? I love you guys. Bye.